Some of you may be familiar with the name J. Bennett Guess. He is one of the executive officers of the United Church of Christ at the denominational level. And Reverend Ben tells this story on the UCC website this week in celebration of All Saints' Day. He tells a story from 25 years ago when he was a brand new young pastor of his first UCC church in Kentucky. And he decided that first year as a pastor, he wanted to have an All Saints' Day service. It's something that the church had never done. And so he announced it to the congregation, and since All Saints' Day fell on a weekday that year, he said that they'd have the service at 7 p.m. so that people could come to church after work. They got all excited about it. He made a program. He picked just the right songs and readings and prepared a great sermon. And so he showed up on All Saints' Day just right before 7 o'clock, and he put the little programs out on the pews and put his sermon up there on the podium. He put on his robe and his stole, and he was all set to go. Well, 7 o'clock came, and nobody showed up. There was not one person who came. And he sat in the front pew, dejected. And then at 7:06, he heard the door of the church open, and he turned around, and it was his mom, who lived an hour away. And she came in and she said, "Oh, Ben, did I get the time wrong? You know, where is everybody?" And he said, "Nobody came. We're not having a service." And she said, "I just drove an hour to get here. We are having a service." And she sat in the pew with the program, and she instructed him to get up on the platform, and they did the whole service together. They sang the songs together. He gave his sermon just to his mom. And he said, "This is the most special All Saints' Day that I will always carry with me. This remembrance of my mom." It's such a beautiful story. And that really is what today is all about. It's remembering our loved ones with those very special moments that live on in us. Now, some of you know I lost both of my parents last year. My mother in May and my father in December. And actually, I shouldn't say I lost them. That is actually a wrong term to say, and I try to correct myself. I like to say what some of you say, that they made their transition. I really like that term because death seems like it's the end. And we know that it's not. We know, like we heard in the words of integration this morning about the Day of the Dead, it's just the next phase. That's what Jesus came to demonstrate, to transform death into new life. So the Day of the Dead, what I love hearing about it this morning is that it is a celebration. It's not something sad where you mourn the people who have died and you grieve. It's actually a day where there's music and dancing and there's cake. And there's altars that you set up for your loved one, and you put out on the altars the things that they loved. You're celebrating their life and their legacy. Now, I received a really wonderful legacy from both of my parents, and that was a firm foundation in the Christian faith. And I also received a great legacy of love and acceptance. And that's what I'm going to remember and celebrate today. But my parents also left me a legacy of worry and anxiety and lack. They would often say that they were depression babies, that they were children of poor immigrants who came of age during the Great Depression. And so these were things they received from their parents and passed on to us. And if we receive those legacies, we can sometimes just keep them going in this kind of cycle of victim consciousness. And we even do that in the words that we say. So we may say, well, yeah, in our family, we just don't talk about our feelings. Or, we have a long-standing saying in our family, the poorhouse is just around the corner. And we kind of keep those going. But we have the power to transform those things. We get to choose faith over fear, and abundance over lack, and light instead of darkness. We get to choose those things. Now, the word legacy, if you look it up in the dictionary, it says something transmitted from an ancestor or predecessor or from the past. And I really like that. It's a transmission. Something transmitted to you from an ancestor or a predecessor or the past. Now, there have been people in history who, when they died, the impact of that transmission was felt on a global level. So if you think of Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Mother Teresa, at the moment of their death, the world felt the impact of that transmission and understood what their legacy was. But this was not the case with Jesus. When Jesus died, his legacy was not immediately understood, and the transmission was not immediately felt. Those early followers of Jesus were totally confused by his death. They were frightened and scared. It didn't make any sense to them. This was the person they thought was their Messiah, and he'd been crucified. But through the power and the workings of the Holy Spirit, they were able to transform that fear into faith and that confusion into understanding. And over 2,000 years later, countless lives have been transformed, and the transmission of Jesus' legacy has been received by those who have been willing to take it and use it to transform their own lives. Now, today, Dan McGavin shared with us about Isabel Graham's legacy. And legacy, actually, some of you may know, it actually has two dictionary definitions. The other definition is a gift of money or property that is received by someone who has died. And so Isabel Graham's legacy is both. Here was this woman, just an ordinary woman in a small town, who left this legacy to our church. And it's a legacy that 60 years later is still blessing us and still serving the community at large. And just as those early Christians were good stewards and caretakers of Jesus' legacy and grew Jesus' legacy, so too the men and women who over the years have taken care of Isabel Graham's legacy to this church, and they've nurtured it and they've grown it, and it continues to be a blessing to all of us. Now, in today's gospel, you notice that Jesus says to his followers that they should not follow the example of the scribes and Pharisees who are building up themselves. These are the people who want a place of importance at the table. They want the best seats, and they want to be invited to the best parties and banquets, and they want to be recognized out around town as being important. Jesus says those who want to exalt themselves will be humbled, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. And I think that fits perfectly with what we're talking about today with legacy. I had a little graphic in the epistle this week, and it said, the things you do for you are gone when you are gone. But the things you do for others, that's your legacy. And so what I would like for all of us to do this week is to bring to our personal prayer time the idea of what legacy am I leaving behind? I know many of you journal during your prayer time. Maybe the prompt for your journal can be, the legacy I will leave when I'm gone is ... And really consider what it is, because that really is your life's purpose. And many of us go through life not really being very clear about what our legacy is. It's not something to build us up, but something that we leave behind, that will go on forever in the lives of those people that we touched. So think about, what do you want your legacy to be? And then what you do after that, once you're very clear about it, is every day you get to think, okay, what am I doing today that is creating this legacy? You can be very conscious then of, okay, well, what am I doing today that is creating this? Because we get to choose our legacy, and we get to create our legacy. It's in our control. It's in our power. Once we know that, then we can decide what it is that we want to leave behind. And we can make it a legacy of service, of stewardship, of giving of our time, talents, and treasures to others. And when we do that, we leave behind a legacy that will touch people many years after we're gone. Namaste. Namaste.